My name is Lela Whitman. I'm 32 years old. And this is the story of how I was disowned at 17, and 15 years later, stood in front of the nation and shattered the legacy of the man who broke me. The last night I spent under my father's roof wasn't filled with slamming doors or screaming matches. No. That would have meant I was allowed to speak. It was quiet. Cold. Like a boardroom verdict. My father sat at the head of our mahogany dining table, the same one where generations of Whitmans had signed real estate deals, political donations, and hush-money checks. "Lela," he said, in that tone that never rose above 60 decibels, but could silence an entire room, "you've embarrassed this family for the last time." All I had done was say I didn't want to marry Gregory Carter. His father was a longtime investor in Whitman Properties, and my engagement to him was apparently already under discussion at our country club. Embarrassed? I asked, stunned. "You're trying to auction me off like a merger deal." That's when he stood. Slowly. Not in anger. But in finality. "You will not speak like that in my house," he said. "You want to live like some wild girl with a laptop and a dream? Fine. Go live. But you do it without my name, my money, or this family." I stood there, feeling like the floor had just opened beneath me. My mother didn't speak. My brothers didn't move. I was 17. Still in high school. Still applying to colleges. And suddenly I was nothing. I left that night with a duffel bag, a used laptop, and $62 in cash. The house staff didn't even say goodbye. Not even Teresa, who had helped raise me. I took the 1:45 a.m. bus from Nashville to San Francisco with nothing but a worn scholarship acceptance letter for a coding camp and a heart full of quiet fury. The first 6 months were a blur of shelters, dollar menu dinners, and sleeping on donated cots. I cleaned dorms at night and coded all day. I used campus Wi-Fi, scavenged textbooks from donation bins, and taught myself in the quiet corners of public libraries. I didn't know what I was building back then, only that every line of code I wrote was one stitch in the armor I'd someday need. By 21, I had my first client. By 23, I launched my startup, Linksa. By 28, we secured a Series B round that put our valuation at $85 million. And by 32? I was in Forbes. I was speaking at tech summits. I was negotiating government contracts. But more than that, I was still waiting. Waiting for the moment when everything they dismissed me for would become everything they needed. That moment came on a Thursday afternoon. My senior assistant, Mara, buzzed into my office. "Lela," she said, cautiously. "A woman named Eleanor Whitman is on line 1. Says she's your mother." I froze. Not because I was surprised. But because part of me always knew this day would come. The day they'd need me. I picked up. "Lela?" Her voice cracked like glass under pressure. "It's Mom." I didn't say anything. "Let her sit in it. Your father, he wants to see you." That's when I laughed. Just once. Cold and sharp. Oh, now he remembers I exist? It's not like that. His company's crumbling, I read the quarterly reports. Half your investors are pulling out. And the Urban Loop project? That disaster? He needs a savior, not a daughter. Silence. Then, she whispered, "Please. Just come to the dinner. He wants to talk." Talk? I leaned back in my leather chair, the skyline of San Francisco glowing behind me. "No. He wants to rewrite history. I'm not here to clean up the mess he made. Not unless I get to set the terms." She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just said, "Maison, listen. Friday. 8 p.m. I hung up. Then turned to the framed photo on my desk, me, standing with the first all-women engineering team I ever built. Not one of them came from privilege. Not one of them had a father who cleared the path. And yet, we'd built empires from ash. That night, I called my publicist. "I want a leak," I said. Just a whisper. Lela Whitman. Mysterious return to old family. Dinner scheduled. For what? I smiled. Let's just say. I'm not going to dinner. I'm going to war. And I intend to win, on live television. Friday arrived with the kind of clarity you only feel when you're about to set fire to the past. Maison Lucin wasn't just a restaurant, it was a statement. Rooftop view, cascading crystal fixtures, and soundproofed private rooms designed for high-stakes negotiation. Or in my case, poetic justice. I arrived 10 minutes early, as always. The dress I wore was navy silk, clean lines, high neckline. Strong. Not seductive. Not apologetic. Just sovereign. When my father walked in, the room chilled. Lawrence Whitman still had the gait of a man who thought he owned every room he entered. But there were cracks in the illusion now, hair more silver than gray, jaw clenched tight. Still no apology. Still no warmth. "Stella," he said stiffly. "It's Lela. You gave up the right to rename me when you erased me." He sat without replying. My mother followed, avoiding eye contact, her dress pressed perfectly. The polished smile she once wore at charity events had faded. Her fingers trembled as she poured herself water. Brandon and Miles slithered in last, 3 minutes late and smug, still dressed like country club royalty even though I knew from background checks that Miles was surviving on high-interest loans, and Brandon had just had his expense reports frozen for audit irregularities. They saw me sitting at the head of the table and paused. "Please," I said, motioning to the seats already labeled with their names. "Let's not make this more awkward than it already is." No one spoke as the server poured champagne. I let the silence thicken until even the air felt strained. Then I tapped my glass. "Once. To family reunions," I said, voice measured. "Though I doubt any of you expected one under circumstances like these." "What kind of family talk do you think this is?" my father growled. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my clutch and pulled out an iPad. A few swipes, and the screen lit up with charts, graphs, and legal filings. Negative cash flow. Pending lawsuits. Internal memos suggesting misappropriated pension funds. And the urban loop collapse? That's a class action lawsuit waiting to erupt. I slid the iPad to the center. Brandon reached for it, then froze. "You've been spying on us," he spat. "No," I replied calmly. "I've been protecting the Whitman name. Something none of you thought I was capable of." I looked at my father. "Did you know your stock is about to be delisted? That the board is preparing a quiet vote to remove you as CEO? I know who they plan to replace you with." His jaw twitched. I sat back. "I'm not here to beg for recognition. I'm here because I've built an empire with no help, no name, and no bloodline. And now that you need me? You're going to pay my price." Miles sneered. "You think the company revolves around you?" "No," I said, my smile sharpening. "It didn't. But now it does. Because I'm the only person who can turn your reputation around before the public rips you apart." I opened my leather folder and slid packets to each of them. "Inside, you'll find your new roles. Brandon, you'll head our Women in Tech initiative. Miles, you'll run our public housing integration project. Mom, you'll be the face of the Eleanor Fund. And Dad?" I paused for effect. "You'll give the opening speech at the Women Forward Gala." He stared at me like I'd asked him to leap off a cliff. "You're insane." "No," I said quietly. "I'm your last chance." "And if we refuse?" Miles asked, tone cocky. I leaned forward. "Then tomorrow morning, 3 national outlets will receive my compiled evidence of financial misconduct. It'll be the end of Whitman Holdings. You'll lose your legacy, your properties, and what little reputation you still cling to. Silence. I rose, collected my things, and turned at the door. One last thing. When the cameras roll, smile. The media loves a redemption arc. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I watched the social feeds light up. Tech queen Lela Whitman spotted in surprise reunion with disgraced real estate dynasty. Is the Whitman family getting a rebrand via their disowned daughter? Women Forward Gala confirms Whitman patriarch to speak. What? I had given them a script. Now we'd see if they could perform. By Monday morning, the transformation had begun, not in their hearts, but in their behavior. That was enough. For now. A week after the dinner, Brandon appeared on a popular morning show, seated across from a woman anchor known for slicing through political theater like butter. Is there anything you'd like to share with the public, especially with your sister? She asked. Brandon exhaled. Long, slow, shaky. I used to think women didn't belong in tech, he said, his voice almost a whisper. That's what my father taught me. And I was foolish enough to believe that siblings didn't need to protect each other, as long as I held my place at the table. He looked directly into the camera. But Lela isn't just my sister. She's the only person in our family who had the courage to confront the truth. And I'm sorry. I watched it live, frozen. The same man who once called me a tech-obsessed freak on Thanksgiving was now weeping on national TV. Either he'd changed, or he finally realized the power I held. My phone buzzed. It was Mom. Can we meet? She asked. I hesitated. But curiosity won. We met at a quiet cafe just 5 minutes from my office, a place I frequented when I needed stillness to think. She was already there, sitting in the corner with a latte she hadn't touched. No makeup. No earrings. Her eyes, red and swollen, looked like she hadn't slept in days. She handed me a thin folder, old, worn. I've kept this for more than a decade. Inside were printouts from early tech blogs. Photos of me at small developer conferences. A blurry shot of me receiving my first Women in Innovation award. A French-language article praising my AI tool for ethical coding. I never knew how to talk to you, she said softly. After you left, every time your name came up, your father would say, she no longer exists. But I couldn't let you disappear. I said nothing. She pulled out a single-page document and slid it across the table. I want to do more than apologize. I want to join the Eleanor Fund. Not for show. Not for him. But to meet the girls. To support them. To use my voice in a way I never used it for you. I stared at the application form. Executive advisor. She had filled it out in pen. If you mess this up, I said slowly, the public will expose everything. I won't protect you. She nodded. I'm not afraid of judgment anymore. I'm afraid of silence. I didn't cry. I didn't hug her. But something shifted. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't the only soldier on the battlefield. That week, I approved her application. Quietly. Internally. No press releases. Not yet. Because I wasn't done. Not until the gala. The Women Forward Gala was set to take place at the Metropolitan Grand Hall in Manhattan, a historic venue that had once hosted events that excluded women entirely. Now, it would spotlight them. My team and I had built it to be the event of the year. Invitations sent to Fortune 500 CEOs, major press outlets, government figures, and every Eleanor Fund scholarship recipient across the country. I stood backstage in a black off-shoulder gown. Sleek, understated, and powerful. Elena, my assistant, whispered, "Your family's here." Lawrence looks out of place. I smirked. I wasn't surprised. For once, he wasn't controlling the narrative. I stepped out to applause, the LED screen behind me glowing. Women who lead the future. I took the mic and spoke clearly. 15 years ago, I was told women didn't belong in tech. That we were supposed to step aside, support the men, and smile quietly. Pause. Tonight, I want to rewrite that story. The screen changed to 20 smiling faces, young women from our scholarship cohort. These pioneers will receive full scholarships through the Eleanor Fund to study, build, and innovate without limitation. I looked toward my family. My mother stood and applauded with tears in her eyes. Brandon nodded, whispering to an investor. Even Miles, the most resistant of all, was clapping, maybe for real, maybe not. But he was doing it. Then, I spoke again. There's someone else who wants to say a few words. The crowd hushed. My father stepped onto the stage. For the first time, he wasn't in control. He held the mic with both hands. The room held its breath. I'm Lawrence Whitman. And I was wrong. The words struck like thunder. I was wrong to think success had only one shape. Wrong to dismiss my daughter's vision. And wrong to believe the old ways were the only ways. He turned to me, then back to the crowd. I am stepping down as chairman of Whitman Holdings. Effective immediately. Leadership will pass to Lela, not because she's my daughter, but because she is the future. Applause erupted. The screen behind us lit up with images, me in a hoodie with a second-hand laptop, next to images of young girls coding, leading, inventing. That night, something ancient shattered. Something new began. For the first time, my father finally saw me, not as a problem, not as a failed daughter, but as a leader. And he wasn't alone anymore. After the gala, the media exploded. Headlines surged across every platform. Disowned tech prodigy takes over family empire with live mic drop. Lela Whitman reshapes gender power dynamics in historic gala speech. From outcast to icon, the daughter who reclaimed the Whitman throne. But what moved me most wasn't the coverage. It was the message from my mother the next morning. Meeting the scholarship students tomorrow. Would love for you to come. Want to hear their stories with you. I paused before replying. Then typed one word. Absolutely. I arrived at the scholarship center in jeans and a blazer. No cameras. No press. Just purpose. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Girls from Detroit, rural Alabama, Queens, even El Salvador and Nigeria. All of them seated in a circle, wide-eyed and clutching notebooks. My mother stood at the center, hair loose, face bare, heart open. When she saw me, she didn't wave. She simply made space. This is Lela, she said. The reason this program exists. The reason I finally learned to speak with my own voice. And then she stepped back. Letting me lead. I shared the story. Not the polished, press-ready one. The real one. The nights I coded with frozen fingers. The rejection letters. The shelters. The loneliness. But also the power in surviving. Success, I told them, isn't always about climbing a ladder. Sometimes it's about building a ladder no one thought should exist. And leaving it behind for others to climb. The girls clapped. A few cried. One stood, a quiet girl named Sophie Tran. I've built something, she said, nervously. It's not perfect, but I'd love to show you. She pulled up a demo on her tablet, an AI interface that scanned emails and highlighted gender-biased phrases, suggesting more inclusive alternatives. I call it the Verity Protocol, she said. But my friends call it the Stella Check. Because it reminds them of you. I blinked back sudden tears. For the first time, I saw the future in someone else's code. 2 weeks later, I invited Sophie to join me on stage at TechVerse 2030 in Berlin. Instead of a keynote, I wanted a conversation. A passing of the torch. She presented Verity Protocol to a room of industry titans. She didn't stammer. She didn't shrink. She stood tall. This isn't about political correctness, she said. It's about structural fairness. It's about building tech that doesn't inherit the biases of the past. That means reprogramming more than just machines, we have to reprogram mindsets. Applause erupted. Not polite, but powerful. Within days, 3 Fortune 500 companies announced they were integrating Verity into their internal systems. A week later, Samsung AI Labs reached out for global deployment. By month's end, the United Nations Technology Council announced Verity would become a global ethical AI standard. Sophie called me that night, breathless. They're calling it the Lela effect. I laughed. You know what they called me when I was your age? Troublemaker. She paused. Then I'm proud to be one. And just like that, something I'd once carried like a scar had become a symbol. But the transformation didn't stop there. Brandon flew to Singapore to help launch our new Whitman Tech Future initiative, funding all-girl coding academies in Southeast Asia. He wasn't performing anymore. He was building. Miles sent me a proposal. A new branch of the fund, Code After Walls, dedicated to women recently released from incarceration. He'd partnered with legal nonprofits and local shelters. You were right, he said over Zoom. I've been wasting the family name on parties and power games. I want to fix what we broke. Even my mother had started traveling. She sent me photos from workshops she held in Detroit, Atlanta, and rural Texas. She wasn't preaching. She was listening. It hit me one night as I sat in my smaller, quieter office at Linksa, a place without marble floors or designer chairs. But with a perfect view of the stars. I had once vowed revenge. Now, I was leading a revolution. And I wasn't doing it alone. Because sometimes, justice isn't about watching others fall. It's about pulling everyone to a higher ground and daring them not to slip again. 3 weeks after Techverse, a letter arrived from the World Economic Forum inviting me to speak at Davos as guest of honor. Theme: Restructuring Gender Leadership in the Digital Age. I read it 3 times, half expecting it to disappear. The very same summit my father once refused to take me to as a teen, saying I had nothing to offer that boardroom men would understand, was now requesting I lead it. I should have felt triumphant. But instead, I felt calm. Settled. Because I no longer needed permission to walk into any room. Instead of accepting the full keynote slot, I suggested something different. I'd like to share the stage, I told their coordinator. With a student from the Eleanor Fund. They hesitated. You mean someone young? A teenager? Yes, I said. Sophie Tran. There was a long pause. Then a reluctant agreement. Sophie's parents cried when I told them. She didn't. She just tightened her ponytail and asked, "How many slides do I get?" We flew to Switzerland together. On the flight, she pulled out a printed email. "This is the one," she whispered. The email that made me start building Verity Protocol. It read, "Your tone is too soft. Try being more assertive, like a man." She circled that last part. Then pointed to her software. Version 2 will flag this kind of feedback. It won't delete it. But it'll require a review and justification. Companies won't be able to hide bias behind advice anymore. I nodded, feeling something stir inside me. A younger version of myself who'd once received similar comments, then cried silently in a coffee shop bathroom. At Davos, Sophie's demo stunned the room. She spoke of digital inclusivity, subconscious reinforcement, and ethical AI evolution, terms that once made grown men yawn now had them scribbling notes and snapping pictures. When the demo ended, a Japanese tech mogul approached me. "We'd like to fund global deployment. Can we partner with your foundation? Before I could reply, Sophie stepped forward and asked, will your implementation teams include women from the regions you serve? He blinked. Then smiled. They will now. After the talk, I walked alone to the summit's lakefront balcony. Snow falling in gentle sheets. The cold didn't bother me anymore. It felt earned. I pulled out my phone. Message from Mom. Speaking at the Scholarship Center in Houston tomorrow. Would love for you to see the video. She attached a photo of her, flanked by 3 Latina high schoolers, one holding up a robotic arm she'd built from recycled parts. My mother looked radiant. Not polished. Not perfect. Present. The next day, Miles sent a video clip from Detroit. He was in a makeshift classroom, showing a group of formerly incarcerated women how to use code to rebuild credit, track legal paperwork, and apply for remote tech jobs. And Brandon? He was in Nairobi, finalizing a partnership for our all-girl AI institute. Sophie's software is going to be our global standard, he messaged. We're calling it Stella Check 2. I laughed aloud. I had spent years thinking justice meant revenge. But real justice? It looked like this. It looked like change. The next few months unfolded like a dream I hadn't dared to imagine. The UN formally adopted Stella Check as a model for global ethical AI. The Eleanor Fund expanded to over 30 countries, offering mentorship, scholarships, and startup capital. Tech companies began requesting our team to conduct internal culture audits, not for PR, but for actual transformation. Schools that once shut out girls from coding classes now requested our curriculum. And one night, back at Linksa, Sophie and I sat in our research lab watching Stella Check 2 run a simulation through a fake office chat environment. The AI flagged a message that read, "Let's not promote her yet. She might be too emotional for leadership." The revised suggestion: evaluate based on past performance and team impact. Emotional reasoning is not a valid barrier. I looked at Sophie. She looked at me. I think version 3 should include cultural nuance analysis, she said. Subtle tone shifts across different languages. I nodded. We'll need to build a multilingual context engine for that. Already working on it, she grinned. I smiled back, but this time it wasn't just pride I felt. It was awe. Because I realized, this wasn't just a story about a girl who'd been disowned and returned to claim her seat. This was the story of how that girl built an entirely new table, and invited the world to sit with her. 1 year after the gala, the Women Forward movement had become a global force. We weren't just funding scholarships anymore, we were building institutions, influencing policy, redesigning entire tech pipelines to include people who had been left out for generations. Not just women, but all underrepresented voices. It was no longer just my fight. And that's how I knew it was time to step further back and lift others higher. That realization came one evening while reviewing applications for the second cohort of Eleanor Fund recipients. I paused on a file from a girl named Maya from rural Kentucky. Straight A's. Built a weather drone prototype using scrap parts and YouTube videos. Her essay said, "I thought maybe I wasn't smart enough until I read about Lela Whitman. Now I want to be someone else's Lela." I stopped reading. There was a tightness in my throat I couldn't explain. This girl didn't know about my cold nights in bus stations, the meals I skipped to afford software books, or the way my hands trembled when I first pitched investors who looked through me. But she knew I existed. And for her, that was enough to believe she belonged. That's when I knew the time had come. I didn't want to lead alone anymore. I wanted to help create leaders. I called my board that week. "I'm stepping down as CEO of Linksa," I announced. Dead silence. Elena, my longtime assistant turned chief strategy officer, sat beside me. She was the first to speak. "You're sure?" I nodded. "I'm not disappearing. I'm evolving." And with that, I handed the reins of my company to a team I trusted with the future. 2 months later, I unveiled Lela, Next. A global mentorship incubator for emerging female tech leaders, designed not just to fund or support, but to walk with them through the valleys most people forget exist. Each year, I would mentor 100 girls directly. Not from behind a desk, but with my hands in their code. My eyes on their presentations. My heart in their growth. And my family? They didn't fade either. My mother became a traveling ambassador for the Eleanor Fund. She no longer read from scripts, she spoke from lived shame and learned strength. Her honesty stunned rooms and inspired mothers across continents. Brandon launched Whitman Future Tech, a non-profit accelerator for women-led AI startups. Miles opened a re-entry program in Chicago. We're not just teaching coding, he told me. We're teaching how to rebuild trust in others, in systems, in themselves. I visited one of his centers and watched as a woman in her 40s demoed a budgeting app she'd coded herself. You remind me of me, I told her. She smiled. No. I remind me of me now. And my father? He was quiet these days. No headlines. No boardrooms. Just present. We had dinner once, months after Davos. No cameras. Just 2 people trying to cross a canyon built on silence. He didn't apologize again. I didn't ask him to. He just said, I saw your Berlin talk. And I understand now why you had to leave. That was enough. We didn't finish our meals. But we finished something that had been fractured for a long time. One afternoon, as I packed up old documents from my Linksa office, I found the envelope again. The one with the letter I wrote to myself at 17. I had intended it as a war cry. A final scream into the void. But I never sent it. Instead, I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. And wrote. We didn't burn it down. We built something better. We didn't fight to destroy. We fought to open the gate. And now, we hold it open, for everyone still coming. I sealed the letter and placed it in the Eleanor Fund archive, where girls like Maya could read it long after I was gone. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It never really was. The final transformation didn't happen in a boardroom or on stage. It happened in a room filled with 2,000 guests, under the silver dome of the newly repurposed Seattle Tech Dome, the same venue that, years ago, had once hosted summits with only male speakers. Now, it was the heart of the Global Women Forward 2040 Gala, honoring women who'd not only survived, but reshaped the world. I stood backstage, alone, listening to the murmurs of thousands. This was the largest gathering we had ever hosted. From 31 countries, women from every discipline to engineering, agriculture tech, healthcare AI, educational platforms, had come to share not just what they'd built, but how they'd endured. The screen on stage flashed their faces, one by one. Among them, Sophie Tran, now 20, the creator of the Verity Protocol and the youngest nominee for the Global Ethics in AI Medal. Maya, 17, who had recently coded a storm detection system used by 2 FEMA departments. And dozens more, some still students, some now founders, some mothers, some survivors. All fearless. My mother sat in the front row, holding hands with 2 girls from Nigeria and Argentina. She wasn't trying to be anyone's example anymore, she was just being, finally. Brandon stood by the Mentors Lounge, introducing new donors to the next batch of Eleanor Fund recipients. Miles was in the back, coordinating the launch of his newest project, Second Chance Code, a program dedicated to formerly incarcerated women-turned-developers. My family, once the very wall that kept me out, was now helping lay the bricks for others to climb. As I stepped onto the stage, a hush fell. The spotlight warmed my skin, but I didn't need it. I didn't need light to be seen anymore. I took the mic and smiled. Not long ago, I believed I had only 2 choices, revenge or forgetting. A pause. Then I looked toward the first row, toward my mother's tearful eyes, toward Sophie's bright grin. But it turns out there's a third path. A harder one. The one where we use the pain, not to destroy, but to build. The screen behind me shifted to a mosaic of faces, over 500 girls and women from across the globe, all funded, mentored, and celebrated through this movement. I was once called the lost daughter, pushed out, erased, forgotten. And for years, I thought the only way to heal was to take back what was stolen. I turned slowly, scanning the crowd. But then I realized, revenge ends a story. But transformation writes a new one. And that's what we're doing here, together. We are building something no one can erase, because we belong here. We've always belonged here. The applause was slow at first. Then rising. Then unstoppable. The screen behind me lit up again, now showing the logo of Stella, next, with the tagline, Leading Tech with Purpose. I stepped aside and held out my hand. Sophie walked onto the stage with 3 girls, one from Morocco, one from Chile, and one from the Bronx. Behind them came my mother, Brandon, and Miles. My entire family stood beside me. This time, not for optics. This time, by choice. I looked around. There were no more apologies to accept. No more demons to slay. No more tables to fight for a seat at. Because we'd built our own. That night, I returned to the Linksa building, not the penthouse suite, but the 21st floor office where Sophie and I used to test beta versions of her AI. The view was simple, just the stars. On the desk sat one final letter. The one I'd once started at 17 but never mailed. I opened it, smiled, and wrote at the bottom. We didn't get revenge. We led the way. We didn't repeat the pain. We redefined the legacy. And most importantly, we made sure no girl ever has to stand alone again. Then I folded it. Placed it in a new drawer. Alongside a stack of blank pages. Because this chapter had ended. But our story was just beginning. Lela's journey wasn't about vengeance. It was about reclamation, of identity, of purpose, and of power. She didn't just return home to confront her past, she reshaped the future for generations. What would the world look like if we stopped waiting for permission and simply built what we needed? Let us know what part of Lela's journey resonated most with you in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where every story reminds you, sometimes the loudest justice is quietly earned.